You hear a lot about new medical devices, but do they all work out financially? Bill Edelman is a serial entrepreneur in the space, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thank you.
How many medical device companies have you built up and sold?
I've built up many medical device companies over my career, but I've sold, I think, 5 to 6 of them.
And what sorts of returns can an investor expect?
Well, it depends entirely on the company itself. It depends on how long they've been in the company. But the rule of thumb for investors, typically when they amortize their returns over time, is about 25% year over year internal rate of return.
And that's cash on cash, or is that with debt?
No, it's usually cash on cash.
And how about the ones that flame out?
Well, when they flame out, they're binary, so they go to zero. So the objective is not to let that happen.
And how many tend to be successful versus how many didn't make it?
Well, it depends on how risky the product is, it's how risky the regulatory path is, and the nature of the clinical activity that you're attempting to address with the product. So the spectrum could go anywhere from it's a low-risk product, but that typically gets a low return, to a high-risk product with the potential for a high-risk return, but that also almost is always binary in terms of its outcome.
And how does that compare with other non-medical device companies?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've been in the medical device field for 36 years, so I'm pretty much fixated on this sector. But it's all over the map. Biotechnology typically has a higher rate of return depending on the stage of the company. Information companies could have a higher rate of return based on, and it could be a shorter duration.
Does it matter if the product in question is in favor with the FDA?
No, FDA's whole objective is to provide safety to patients and to really make sure that the product preclinical or clinical data supports the indication for use. But FDA doesn't necessarily take a position on whether they are in particular favor of a type of technology.
Company sale or IPO?
I personally go for company sale.
Just because it's easier?
Well, because the cost of entering an IPO market could be several $1 million, and that would otherwise be used to operate the company and create greater facts regarding its value in the minds of strategic buyers. So I typically would always opt in favor of an early exit for the benefit of the shareholders versus an IPO.
When do you know when the right time to sell is?
Well, it depends on a lot of factors. Some of them are internal, which relate to how many facts can you create about the company relative to FDA regulatory clearance, maybe international regulatory clearance, so you can commercialize in 2 separate markets, the ability to initiate and clear intellectual property, which protect the technology, and the clinical need for the product, which may be demonstrated by thought leaders or clinicians who use the device.
When you're on your 3rd or 4th company, you've had some wins, how much of it is formulaic?
It all becomes changes in nouns. All the verbs stay the same.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
The actions necessary to succeed are usually highly repetitive, especially in how you choose the companies to work with. So it becomes case studies that you rely upon from prior experiences going forward.
How many people on your management team do you carry with you in 3 or 4?
Usually you carry a few people with you, and providers of capability such as intellectual property attorneys or corporate counsel, regulatory experts are always critical to have. So I usually bring with me a talent pool that I've worked with and trusted in the past.
And how about investors?
Investors who are successful with you always want to be associated with you in the future.
And do they care that you are always in the same industry?
No, they like that. That's where they elect to invest.
Hardware versus software, does it matter to you?
Well, medical devices usually don't break down that way. They break down according to whether it's a disposable device, which is used once and then discarded, an implant device, which is left inside the patient. Some of these companies have hardware associated with them, which have embedded software. But I typically favor single-use devices or some implant devices.
What changes do you see in the industry moving forward?
FDA's regulatory oversight is highly variable. In some years, it's quite extensive, very invasive. Other years, it's somewhat hands-off. I expect that FDA will continue to improve their understanding of medical devices and the risks associated with them. And so the evidence that companies need to provide will increase, and therefore the preclinical testing before a product can be brought to market will increase.
How important is it for these products to have sales outside of the United States?
Well, from the perspective of a strategic buyer, most of those buyers are based in the United States. And so U.S. sales is usually a touchstone.
If one of your patents runs out, does it matter to you if the product is selling extremely well?
It always matters because a strategic buyer will look at the absence of a patent as a reason to degrade your value. So you need to maintain intellectual property as an asset that can sell alongside of the product.
And in that same vein, of the companies that you've sold to, have most of them been strategic buyers or financial buyers?
All strategic buyers.
And why is that?
Because they have a commercialization channel that already exists. They have salesmen calling on the doctors who will use the kind of product that we produce. So they are most interested to add to their sales portfolio by taking on the product that we've developed.
Do you ever think that you've had too many successes or too many years in the business and it's time to stop, or does that just excite you to keep moving forward?
You can always have too many years in the business, but you can never have too many successes.
Excellent. Bill, thank you.
Pleasure.
Bill Edelman, serial entrepreneur in the medical device industry.